Alright guys, this video is going to cover Objective 1 of Chapter 10, and so Chapter 10 is actually split into two parts. So we're going to start off with Part 1, which mostly focuses on the structure of muscles, and we're going to kind of start going into the muscle contraction and how it works. So for Objective 1, we're going to focus on the properties of muscle, the characteristics of muscle, and the different types of muscle, which that should just be a review from our tissues. And so starting with some properties of muscle, one of the things that allows us to move are these properties of muscle. And so number one, muscles have the ability to contract, which a contraction is just when the muscles shorten, and that's what actually allows for movement. The muscles can get excited. Now, another type of tissue that is excitable are your neurons, your nervous tissue, and so they're able to respond to stimuli. And so essentially what's going to happen is kind of like we saw in our neurons, our muscles are going to be able to be depolarized, and they're going to be able to kind of transmit an action potential along their membrane like the neurons did. They're able to extend or stretch, extensibility. And they're also able to go back to normal. So they can stretch, but then they can also go back to their original position. And so muscles are very unique in that way. And then all those properties together allow the muscles to help us move. And so they are bundles of muscle fibers. So muscle fiber is just another name for a muscle cell. And it's those muscle fibers inside of those cells where we will find the contractions. And the contractions can lead to movements. It could be the big movements in our skeletal muscles, like flexing and extending and circumduction, that allow us to do things like walk and even talk and speak and all of those different things. They can also be movement in our smooth muscles, which allows like food to pass through the digestive tract or the blood vessels to constrict or dilate. Or it could also be the pumping of our heart, because remember we do have three types of muscle tissue. And so muscles come from the mesoderm embryonic germ layer. So remember you have your ectoderm on the outside, the mesoderm in the middle, and then you have your endoderm on the inside. And so like connective tissues, your muscles come from the mesoderm, which is that middle layer of embryonic tissue. And so kind of like we saw in bones, you had osteoblasts that will become mature bone cells. You're going to have myoblasts, which myo equals muscle. Your myoblasts are going to form your more mature muscle cells, which we call muscle fibers. And so in terms of our muscles, a lot of people, if you work out or things like that, you know that your muscles can get bigger. They can also get smaller when you don't use them. But essentially the number of skeletal fibers, the actual cells that we have, is pretty much the same. So what happens is that when we work out our muscles, the actual cells are going to hypertrophy or get bigger. So we're not necessarily making more muscle cells, we're just making the muscle cells that we do have larger. Alright, so the major functions of muscle are definitely going to be movement. That is a huge one, and that's what that contractibility allows us to do. But they also help us maintain our posture, and they're also important in helping us to generate heat. So we're going to look at some chemical reactions. And through metabolism, heat can be generated and help us maintain body temperature. This is also why we get hot when you work out and you're working your muscles even extra, because of all the chemical reactions that are taking place in your muscles to make ATP. And so that does generate heat, which helps us maintain homeostasis in terms of temperature. And then just kind of as a quick review, we are going to take a look at the three types of muscle again. Now our focus for a muscle system is going to be skeletal muscle. Because cardiac muscle, the heart, will be covered more in your cardiovascular system, and then smooth muscle is going to be in those internal organs, so that can be covered with those systems that involve those organs. And so mostly this unit is going to focus on skeletal muscle. But we do need to remember that there are three types. Like I said, all of this should just be a review. So in skeletal muscle, you have long cylindrical fibers like you see here. They kind of like are cigar shaped, pretty uniform, okay? They are multinucleate, and so all these little dark spots, those are the nuclei. They kind of get pushed to the side because of the organelles that are inside of the long skeletal muscle fibers. And the reason they're multinucleate is because you've got several cells that are joining together to form that muscle fiber. And so there's many nuclei inside of those fibers. They are striated. which the striations are these stripes that go this way, and we're going to see why that happens. The striations come from the proteins actin and myosin. This is the one muscle type that is voluntary. We do have control over our skeletal muscle. And the reason we can control them is because they are the ones that are attached to bone, and between the bones moving at their joints, we are able to voluntarily move those muscles. Now the next type is cardiac muscle, and the cardiac muscle is going to be in the myocardium of your heart. It's what allows your heart to beat. Similar to skeletal muscle in a couple of ways. They do kind of have these longer cells, but they are branched, and so they're not quite as uniform in their structure as you can see here. They also have these special junctions called intercalated disc, and that allows for communication between the muscle cells of your heart. They typically only have one nucleus. They may have a couple, but typically it's one. Once again, we see striations, and that comes from the actin and myosin, but the heart is involuntary. We do not have to tell it to beat. And then our last muscle type is smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is smooth because it is not striated. Okay, it does not have those stripes. It doesn't have the same type of proteins in them that are going to be contracting like the other ones. So it's a little bit different in its contraction and movement. The fibers are more uniform and spindle-shaped, and spindle-shaped means they're just kind of tapered on the ends, so you see how they kind of get more narrow at the ends, and they're kind of fatter in the middle. They have one nucleus. They are also involuntary. We don't have to tell the food to move through our digestive tract. The digestive tract just naturally kind of pushes it through. And so we'll find this in the walls of our internal organs, like our digestive tract, our bladder, things like that. Also your blood vessels. All right, and that's going to finish up Objective 1, and we'll continue on with Objective 2 in the next video.